A millionaire saved a child locked in the trunk of a car in the hot midday sun. A few days later, he received a photo. In it, the boy was holding a rifle and... The air outside smelled of heat and asphalt, the kind that clung to skin and left a dull pressure in the lungs. Russell adjusted the cuffs of his suit as he stepped onto the pavement, the weight of the afternoon meeting still hanging over him. Deals had been made, signatures exchanged, polite laughter shared over expensive wine. But as always, the moment he left the table, a peculiar emptiness settled in, like he had misplaced something vital and couldn't remember where to look for it. The cafe across the street was barely a 5-minute walk. He moved on instinct, his mind already filtering through the emails waiting for him and the calls he still needed to make. Then he heard it. A sound, faint, almost swallowed by the noise of the city. A cry. Russell stopped mid-step, brows knitting together. It wasn't the cry of a child throwing a tantrum or the sharp wail of a baby. This was muffled, weak, as if trapped beneath something. He turned his head, scanning the near-empty parking lot, his gaze skimming over rows of sun-baked cars. Another sound. A whimper this time. Russell's chest tightened. He followed it, his shoes clicking against the pavement, his eyes darting between vehicles. He reached a black sedan, parked 2 spots away from his own, and paused. The trunk was closed, the windows rolled up, the metal scorching under the afternoon sun. And then he heard it again. He stepped closer, resting a palm against the car and pressing his ear near the trunk. Thud. A small, weak knock. His pulse kicked up. "Hey!" He turned toward the nearest car, where a man in a button-down was typing on his phone. "Do you hear that?" The man frowned, lowering his screen. "Hear what?" Russell knocked on the trunk. "There's someone, inside." Button-down guy pocketed his phone and approached, pressing his own ear against the car. Another cry, barely more than a strained gasp. The man took a step back. "Jesus!" Russell didn't hesitate. He tried the door handles, locked. He knocked against the trunk. "Hey! Can you hear me?" A faint noise. A whimper, a scratch of movement. The hairs on the back of Russell's neck stood up. "We need to open this," he said, scanning the lot. "We need something." "I'll call 911, Button-down stammered, already dialing. Russell didn't wait. His eyes landed on a tire iron leaning against a nearby maintenance cart. Without a second thought, he grabbed it, fingers tightening around the handle. He brought it down hard against the lock, once, twice, metal clashing against metal. The sound rang through the parking lot, drawing a few onlookers, their eyes flickering with curiosity and concern. "Sir," a woman started, but then she heard it, the small, strangled noise from inside the trunk. Russell ignored them all. He struck the lock again, his shoulders burning from the force, sweat beginning to bead at his temples. "Come on!" A younger man in a security uniform ran over. "What's going on?" "There's a kid in the trunk," Button-down explained, voice tense. Without hesitation, the guard reached for his belt, producing a crowbar. "Step back." Russell barely moved. The guard wedged the crowbar beneath the latch, straining, twisting, and prying it open. The lock snapped with a sharp crack, and then the trunk lurched open. Heat surged out in an oppressive wave. And there, crumpled inside, barely breathing, was a boy. He couldn't have been older than 9. His skin was flushed, soaked in sweat, and dark hair clung to his forehead. His small chest barely rose and fell, fingers curled weakly near his side. The heat had drained him, taking almost everything he had. For the first time in years, Russell's heart stammered. He reached in without thinking, without caution, without his usual distance. His arms slid beneath the boy's frail frame, lifting him carefully, and the second he did, the child's head lolled against his shoulder. Too light, too limp. A hand clutched at Russell's sleeve, weak, trembling, a breathless whisper. "Help!" Russell's throat tightened. The weight in his arms was unfamiliar, but he knew one thing for certain. This was not a weight he could ignore. "It's okay. I'll take you to the hospital." Russell barely registered the heat of the child in his arms as he yanked open the car door and lowered him onto the leather seat. Liam's body was limp, too light, and far too still. "Stay with me, kid," Russell muttered, his voice tighter than he intended. He reached across, fumbling with the seatbelt before slamming the door shut. The moment he slid behind the wheel, he was already shifting into gear. The hospital. Where the hell was the nearest hospital? His mind, usually sharp and calculated, felt slow under the pressure. He hit the gas. The streets were clogged, rush-hour traffic, moving at a crawl. But Russell didn't have the patience for waiting. He gripped the wheel, jaw clenched, weaving through lanes, ignoring the blaring horns and the irritated glares of other drivers. His gaze flicked to the boy beside him. Liam's head lolled slightly against the window, his breath shallow and his skin damp with sweat. Russell exhaled sharply. "Hey, kid." No response. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Just hang on, all right? We're almost there." Another turn, too sharp, tires screeching, but he didn't care. The glowing red emergency sign came into view, and Russell's chest unclenched just slightly. He pulled up hard at the entrance, barely shifting into park before he was out of the car, yanking the door open, scooping Liam back into his arms. The hospital doors slid apart. "I need a doctor!" Russell's voice cut through the sterile air as heads turned, nurses and orderlies rushing toward him. And for the first time in a long, long time, Russell felt afraid. The hospital waiting room was sterile and indifferent, pale blue walls, flickering overhead lights, the hum of quiet conversations, and the occasional beeping of a heart monitor down the hall. It smelled of antiseptic and something faintly metallic, like old blood scrubbed from linoleum floors. Russell sat in the hard plastic chair, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely together. He had driven here faster than he should have, the boy's limp weight pressing against his chest the entire way. He could still feel it, the heat of his feverish skin, the unsettling lightness of a child who hadn't been fed enough, hadn't been cared for enough. His suit jacket, which he had draped over Liam's frail frame, lay beside him, damp with sweat. The emergency doors swung open, and a nurse stepped out, scanning the room. "Sir?" Russell stood before she could finish, his voice clipped. "The kid?" "He's stable," she said, tucking a clipboard under her arm. "Severe dehydration, some mild heat exhaustion, but no internal damage. He was lucky." Lucky. Russell exhaled, slow and steady, as if the words had unclenched something deep in his chest. "You can see him now," she added, nodding toward the hallway. The hospital room was dimly lit, just a soft glow from a bedside lamp cutting through the dark. The boy, Liam, lay still, his small frame almost disappearing beneath the thin white blanket. His breathing was slow, rhythmic, the kind that came after exhaustion had wrung every last bit of resistance from the body. Russell stood near the doorway, uncertain. He wasn't supposed to be here. His life wasn't the kind that required hospital visits, waiting room silences, or sitting beside unconscious children. He was a man of numbers, deals, concrete outcomes, not a man who carried half-dead kids in his arms and broke car trunks open with a tire iron. Yet here he was. He stepped forward, pulling the chair closer, the scrape of metal against tile sharp in the quiet room. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, minutes, maybe an hour, before Liam stirred. The boy blinked up at the ceiling, disoriented. Then his gaze flickered toward Russell, wary, calculating. "You passed out in a trunk," Russell said, voice low but even. "You're in a hospital." Liam's lips parted, like he wanted to say something, but instead he looked away, his fingers curling into the blanket. Silence stretched. Then, hoarse and barely above a whisper, "You're the one who opened it." Russell nodded. Liam swallowed, his throat dry. "Oh." He hesitated, then quieter. "Thanks." It was the kind of thanks that didn't come easy, the kind squeezed out through layers of pride and practiced silence. Russell recognized it. He didn't acknowledge it, didn't make it heavier than it needed to be. Instead, he leaned back, arms crossed. "What were you doing in there?" The boy didn't answer at first. His fingers tightened around the blanket, and he shrunk inwards, just slightly, like the question alone was a weight. Then, finally, a small voice. "Sleeping." Russell's brow furrowed. "In a trunk." Liam's shoulders lifted, half a shrug, half a flinch. "It was open when I found it." A pause, a flicker of something too sharp for a child's eyes. "Wasn't supposed to lock behind me." The weight of those words settled between them. Russell studied him. Too thin, too guarded, too used to places a kid shouldn't have to be. He didn't ask the next question immediately, just let the silence sit until Liam finally exhaled, small and resigned. "I ran away." A beat. "From where?" Liam's jaw tensed. "A place that wasn't good." Russell didn't push. He had seen enough in the business world to recognize the shape of damage, even if he didn't know the details. The way the boy's hands twitched, the way his gaze never settled in one place too long. This wasn't a kid who got lost at a carnival or ran away over a bedtime argument. This was something deeper. Before Russell could say anything else, the door creaked open, and a woman in a grey blazer entered, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Whitmore?" She glanced at him briefly before shifting her focus to Liam. "And you must be Liam." Liam stiffened. "I'm with Child Protective Services," she said, her voice carefully measured. "The hospital reported your situation, and we're here to make sure you're safe." Liam didn't speak. She glanced at Russell. "Do you have any relation to the child?" "No," Russell answered smoothly. "Then I appreciate your help in bringing him here, but I'll need to arrange for Liam to be transferred to a verified state shelter." The reaction was instant. Liam sat up too fast, his breath catching, fingers twisting into the sheets. "No." The woman softened her voice. "I understand this is difficult, but it's procedure. We'll make sure." "I'm not going back." Liam's voice wavered, but the fear beneath it was genuine, raw. "You can't make me." "Liam, I promise, I won't go back." The way he gripped Russell's sleeve then, small but desperate, caught Russell off guard. The boy wasn't looking at the caseworker anymore. He was looking at him. Russell wasn't a parent. He wasn't even a particularly kind man. But the way Liam's fingers clenched into the fabric of his sleeve, the way his entire body braced as if waiting to be thrown back to whatever place he had escaped from. Something in Russell shifted. He looked at the woman. "He can stay with me." Silence. The caseworker blinked, adjusting her clipboard. "Mr. Whitmore, that's—" "For now," Russell said, voice calm but final. "Just for now." Liam exhaled, something in his shoulders uncoiling just slightly. And for the first time, Russell felt it. The weight of responsibility settling in, unfamiliar, yet undeniable. This kid was his problem now, whether he wanted him to be or not. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow as Russell drove, his hands steady on the wheel, yet his mind uneasy. The boy, Liam, sat stiffly in the passenger seat, his fingers curled in his lap, his posture too still, too controlled, as if even shifting his weight would somehow be an inconvenience. Neither of them spoke. Russell wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion settling in, or the fact that he had just made a decision completely outside the boundaries of his well-ordered life, but something about the silence felt thick, unresolved. The navigation guided him through familiar streets until they reached the gated entrance of his home. As the security system scanned his license plate, the heavy iron gates groaned open, revealing the long, winding driveway leading to the house. Liam's gaze flickered out the window. He didn't say anything, but Russell caught the way his fingers twitched, a subtle clench and unclench. They pulled up in front of the mansion. Glass, steel, and sharp angles, cold and precise, a house built for functionality, not comfort. The exterior lights cast long shadows over the pristine marble steps leading up to the double doors. Russell shut off the engine. He sat for a second, exhaling through his nose before unbuckling his seatbelt. "Come on," he said, opening his door. Liam hesitated. Then, wordlessly, he followed. Inside, the house was silent. The foyer stretched wide, polished floors reflecting the dim glow of the recessed ceiling lights. Every surface was immaculate, the furniture untouched, more for display than for use. Russell tossed his keys onto a sleek black console table near the entrance. "You can take your shoes off here," he said absently, toeing off his own. Liam, however, didn't move. Russell turned, catching the way the boy's eyes darted over the space, taking in every sharp line, every reflective surface. His shoulders were tight, his stance carefully neutral, like someone stepping into foreign territory where the wrong move could get them thrown out. Russell had seen that kind of silent calculation before, in boardrooms, in negotiations where men measured their words like weapons, but not in a kid. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face, before gesturing vaguely toward the hallway. "Guest rooms down this way." Liam followed at a careful distance, his footsteps barely making a sound. Russell pushed open a door. The room inside was as pristine as the rest of the house. A neatly made bed, white sheets, a modern desk, a single chair. Everything too neat, too untouched, like a hotel room no one had ever actually lived in. He turned back to Liam. "It's yours for now." The boy didn't step forward, didn't touch anything. Russell exhaled, leaning against the door frame. "Look, kid, I don't expect you to be chatty. Just keep to yourself. Don't touch my stuff. No trouble." A slow nod. Nothing else. It was good enough. Russell left him there. The door left ajar as he walked back down the hall, rolling his shoulders. Maybe he was making a mistake. Maybe he should have let Child Services handle it. But the memory of Liam's grip on his sleeve, of that silent, desperate plea, "I won't go back," pressed against his ribs like an unresolved weight. He sighed. One night. Maybe two. Then he'd figure it out. The dining room was too large for two people. Russell sat at the head of the long table, a glass of water beside him. Across from him, Liam sat stiffly, a plate of food in front of him, untouched. Neither spoke. Liam finally picked up a fork, moving carefully, chewing slowly, too slowly, like someone waiting for the food to be taken away. Russell watched him out of the corner of his eye. After a few minutes, he leaned back, crossing his arms. "I'm not going to starve you, you know." Liam froze mid-bite, his posture going rigid. Then, as if realizing the tension in his own body, he forced himself to relax, or at least tried to. Russell sighed, dragging a hand over his face. "Forget it. Just eat." Liam lowered his head and did exactly that. Days passed. Russell wasn't around much. His schedule was built on business, long hours, late nights. But when he did come home, he started noticing things. The blankets on the guest bed were always neatly folded, the sheets tucked in, as if Liam was making sure he left no trace of himself. The coffee mug Russell left in the sink, washed and placed back on the drying rack. The library, which he rarely used, had its books rearranged, not alphabetically, but in neat, meticulous rows. Liam moved like a shadow, quiet and unobtrusive, as if he believed he was only allowed to exist so long as he didn't take up too much space. But then there were other moments. One evening, Russell came home late, tension from the day still clinging to his muscles. As he passed the library, he paused, because there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was Liam. A book rested in his lap, fingers gripping the worn edges of the pages. His expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in the way his shoulders weren't hunched, weren't braced, just relaxed. Russell watched for a second. Then, without thinking too much about it, he walked into the kitchen. A minute later, he returned, setting a warm glass of milk on the small side table next to the boy. Liam's head snapped up, eyes flicking to him with quiet surprise. Russell didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. A few minutes later, when he passed by again, the glass was empty, and for the first time, something in the house felt a little less empty too. The first time Russell woke up to find Liam sitting outside his bedroom door. It was past 3 in the morning. He had nearly tripped over the boy in the dark, one foot catching on the edge of the small figure curled up just beyond the doorframe. Liam wasn't asleep, just sitting there, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes staring at the hallway floor like it held the answers to something no child should have to question. Russell sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. He was too tired for this. "You planning to sleep there all night?" Liam flinched at the sound of his voice, but quickly masked it behind the same careful blankness he always wore. "No," he mumbled. Russell exhaled, tilting his head back against the doorway. He should tell the kid to go back to his room, should tell him to stop hovering like some lost ghost in the middle of the night. Instead, he turned, walked back inside, and came back out a second later. He tossed a spare pillow onto the floor beside Liam. "If you're going to be there, at least sit on something comfortable," he muttered before stepping back inside. Liam didn't respond, but the next morning, the pillow was still there, slightly indented. A week passed. Russell wasn't sure how, but the boy was still in his house. And worse, he had somehow become part of his routine. It wasn't like Liam asked for anything. That was the unsettling part. The kid didn't make noise, didn't complain, and didn't even seem to exist most of the time, except in small, quiet ways that Russell kept noticing. Like the way Liam left the porch light on when Russell came home late. Or the way he hovered near the sink after dinner, waiting for Russell to leave so he could wash the dishes. And now, grocery shopping. Russell wasn't sure why he brought Liam with him. Maybe because it felt weird leaving him alone in that house, or maybe because he needed to see how the kid acted in normal places. The supermarket was bright and crowded, people moving through aisles with the efficiency of habit. Russell grabbed a cart and started down the produce section. Liam trailed behind, hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie. Russell tossed a few things into the cart: milk, coffee, whatever he usually grabbed. At some point, he noticed Liam hovering near the snack aisle, eyes flicking toward the shelves before quickly looking away. Russell paused. "Go get whatever you want," he said, keeping his voice neutral. Liam hesitated. For a second, Russell thought he wouldn't move, but then, slowly, carefully, like he expected to be told off for it, Liam stepped forward. Russell pretended to browse the shelves, watching out of the corner of his eye. Liam picked up a small pack of biscuits, holding it so lightly it looked like he expected someone to snatch it from him. He turned it over in his hands once, then set it back down. Russell didn't say anything, didn't comment, just casually grabbed the pack and tossed it into the cart. Liam blinked. Then, slowly, a small, barely there smile flickered across his face. Russell pretended not to notice. It rained that night. Not just rain, a storm. The kind that rattled windows and sent wind howling through the trees. Russell came home late, his jacket damp from the drizzle, shoulders tight from a long day of meetings and mind-numbing reports. As he walked into the house, he expected silence. Instead, he heard the faint crackle of a fire. His footsteps slowed. Turning toward the living room, he found Liam curled up on the floor by the fireplace. He wasn't asleep, just sitting there, arms tucked around himself, gaze fixed on the flames. Russell frowned. The kid had a bed, a whole damn room. But something about the way Liam sat, like the warmth of the fire was something he had never been allowed to have, made Russell hesitate. He didn't say anything, didn't ask. Instead, He turned, walked back down the hall, and returned with a blanket. Without a word, he draped it over Liam's shoulders. The boy stilled. Russell didn't wait for a reaction. He just walked away. But later, when he passed by again, Liam was holding the blanket tighter. And for the first time, Russell didn't mind that the house wasn't empty. Russell had never been the type to notice small details. His world had always been big moves, high-stakes decisions, numbers that shaped markets. Yet over the past few weeks, his house, the house that had never quite felt lived in, began to change. At first, it was subtle. The air felt different when he came home, cleaner, less hollow. He hadn't hired extra help, yet the hallways were always swept. The coffee table never collected dust, and the dishes he barely remembered using were somehow washed and stacked neatly in the cabinet. And then there were the meals. Russell rarely cooked. He either ordered in or ate at work, fueling himself with caffeine and convenience. But lately, when he came home, the kitchen wasn't empty. One evening, earlier than usual, he found Liam at the stove. The boy stood on his tiptoes, carefully stirring a pot, the sleeves of his hoodie rolled up to his elbows. The scent of something warm filled the space, simple, unassuming, but unmistakably home-cooked. Russell leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Didn't know you could cook." Liam stiffened at the sound of his voice, though his grip on the spoon didn't falter. "I used to help in the kitchen." His voice was quiet, almost like an afterthought. Russell didn't ask where. He didn't have to. Instead, he nodded toward the pot. "What is it?" Liam hesitated. "Soup." It was a poor answer. The kid was trying to keep it vague, as if anything more specific might be too much. Russell glanced at the ingredients. The broth, noodles, a few leftover vegetables that had probably been sitting in the fridge untouched for weeks. Nothing extravagant, but real, intentional. Russell pulled out a chair at the small kitchen table. "Guess I'll have some then." Liam blinked, surprised, and for the first time, Russell saw something shift in his expression. A flicker of something like relief. The city had never felt heavier than it did that night. The storm had been threatening to break all afternoon, dark clouds rolling in, swallowing the skyline in layers of grey. The first drops of rain had begun to fall, just as Russell was stepping out of his office, his body aching from a day that had stretched too long and given too little. Everything had been a fight today. Meetings that dragged past their time slots, reports that weren't up to standard, investors who called demanding reassurance in a market that thrived on chaos. Russell had snapped at his assistant, barely touched his lunch, spent the last hour drowning in emails that all screamed urgent, but held no actual solutions. By the time he pulled into his driveway, his patience had frayed thin. Then he saw Liam. The boy stood just beyond the gate, holding an umbrella, waiting. Russell rolled down the window, rain immediately splattering against the side of the car. "What the hell are you doing out here?" Liam tilted his head slightly, voice calm, simple. "It's raining." Russell stared at him, the weight of the day still pressing against his skull. He wanted to say something, something firm, something that reminded the kid he didn't need to be standing outside like some kind of stray. But he didn't, because Liam wasn't making a point. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He was just there, waiting. Russell sighed, running a hand down his face. "Come inside." Liam stepped back, letting the car through, carefully shaking off the umbrella before following Russell inside. Russell shrugged off his wet jacket, his muscles still tense from the long day. He should have gone straight to his office, to his laptop, to the pile of unfinished work waiting for him. Instead, he turned to Liam, eyes flicking toward the umbrella. "You didn't have to do that." Liam met his gaze, his voice steady. "You'd get wet." Russell let out a slow breath. Something warm, something unfamiliar curled inside his chest, and for the first time, he wondered why the house didn't feel so empty anymore. "Leave a comment, fish," if you're listening to this story at night, and comment fruit if it's still morning. Russell's office was a battlefield. Emails piled up in his inbox, all marked urgent, all needing immediate responses. His calendar was overbooked, back-to-back meetings that blurred into one another, each one draining what little energy he had left. The stock market had taken an unexpected dip that morning. Investors were calling for answers. Reports needed rewriting. His CFO was pushing for decisions he didn't have time to make. By mid-afternoon, Russell had barely moved from his chair. He exhaled, pressing his fingers against his temple, the glare from his monitor too sharp, too unrelenting. Then, his eyes drifted. Tucked off to the side of his desk, half hidden beneath a stack of papers, was a photograph. Russell hadn't even realized it was there. In the image, Liam stood slightly off-center, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets, shoulders drawn up like he wasn't sure how to pose. But he was smiling, awkward, small, but real. Russell frowned. When the hell was this taken? Then it hit him. A free photographer at the mall had offered to take this picture of them the other day, one of those polite gestures toward family that didn't really mean anything. Except now, it did. Russell stared at the photo, something unreadable settling in his chest. The fatigue, the noise, the constant pressure pressing against his ribs. Somehow, for just a moment, it didn't feel heavy anymore. Mornings in the office were routine, predictable, controlled. Russell thrived in that. His life was built around carefully calculated decisions, markets that followed patterns, deals that relied on logic rather than emotion. He didn't allow distractions, didn't let anything personal interfere with business. But today, something was off. He had felt it from the moment he walked in, the hum of conversation in the office, the steady clack of keyboards, his assistant's usual efficiency as she handed him the day's agenda. Everything was the same, except him. He couldn't shake the feeling, the strange sense of unease that sat heavy in his chest. And then, the envelope arrived. A plain, unmarked package placed on his desk. No sender, no identifying marks. Russell frowned, setting his coffee down. His instincts sharpened, tension creeping into his shoulders. Slowly, he reached for the envelope, peeled it open, and slid the contents onto his desk. A single photograph. His breath stilled. At first, his mind rejected what he was seeing. Liam. But not the Liam who waited for him in the rain, holding an umbrella like it was a duty. Not the quiet boy who folded blankets so neatly it was as if he was trying to erase any sign that he had ever been there. No, this was someone else. In the image, Liam stood with a sniper rifle, his grip steady, his stance practiced, his expression unreadable. A child soldier. Russell gripped the edges of the paper, his fingers pressing hard into it as if he could somehow force it to change. This wasn't the same kid who hesitated to take food from the shelves at the grocery store. This wasn't the boy who sat silently by the fireplace on stormy nights, wrapped in the blanket Russell had given him. This wasn't Liam. And yet, it was. Russell felt his pulse in his ears, a slow, heavy pounding. "Sir," his assistant's voice barely registered, "the finance team is ready for you." Russell didn't move. His entire focus remained locked on the photograph, as if looking away would make it more real. "Sir?" She tried again. He blinked, forced himself to close the envelope. His hands felt cold. "Move the meeting," he said, his voice clipped, distant. His assistant hesitated. He never rescheduled finance meetings, never. But something in his tone left no room for argument. "Understood," she murmured, stepping away. The moment the door shut, Russell leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. His thoughts were a mess, tangled in contradictions. This had to be fake, a mistake, someone trying to manipulate him. But deep down, he knew better. He had seen the way Liam carried himself. Too precise, too aware. The way he never asked for things, never reached for more than he was given. Russell's stomach twisted. He had been telling himself that Liam was just a lost kid, a quiet, careful kid who had survived something bad. But now, he wasn't sure what that something really was. He needed answers. The house felt different when he stepped inside that evening, colder. It was subtle. Maybe it was just in his head. But after the long, tense drive home, nothing felt the same. He found Liam at the kitchen table, flipping through an old book. The boy barely acknowledged his arrival, his posture as still and measured as ever. Russell stood in the doorway for a second, watching him. Then, without a word, he dropped the photograph onto the table. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Liam's reaction was immediate. His breath hitched, his fingers curling against the book's pages. But he didn't look away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Russell's voice, when he finally spoke, was low, controlled, dangerous. "You want to tell me what the hell this is?" Liam stared at the photo. He didn't ask where it came from, didn't try to deny it, didn't even flinch. Instead, he exhaled, slow and careful, and then, in a voice so quiet it barely carried across the room, "You're going to hate me now, aren't you?" Russell felt something in his chest twist. The way Liam said it, not with fear, not with desperation, but with quiet resignation, was worse than any answer Russell could have expected. The silence stretched between them. Heavy, unyielding. Russell stood motionless, hands braced against the edge of the table, staring down at the photograph. Liam, on the other hand, simply sat there, his expression blank, his fingers curling slightly against his lap, as if waiting for something inevitable. Russell exhaled sharply, steadying himself. Anger churned beneath his skin, but so did something else. Something colder, heavier, confusion, doubt. He forced his voice to stay level. "Talk." Liam's fingers tightened, but he didn't hesitate, didn't try to evade. Instead, he spoke, slow, measured, unflinching. "The orphanage wasn't really an orphanage," he began. His voice was even, but there was something hollow in it, something rehearsed, like he had already told himself this story 1,000 times over. Russell's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Liam looked down at his hands. It was a recruitment center. They didn't take in just any kids. They had a type. His lips pressed together. Strong, smart, quiet. The ones no one would come looking for. Russell felt a weight settle in his chest. At first it seemed normal. We were given food, shelter, education, but then they started sorting us. His voice dipped slightly, a hint of something, not fear, not anger, but something far worse. Acceptance. The ones who weren't qualified disappeared. We never saw them again. Russell's fingers curled into his palm. The rest of us were taken to a different place. He didn't specify where, and Russell wasn't sure he wanted to know. Liam inhaled slowly. Training started immediately. Guns, combat, endurance drills. They controlled everything. What we ate, when we slept, how we thought. He swallowed. It wasn't discipline. It was conditioning. Russell's stomach twisted, but he didn't interrupt. Liam's gaze flickered toward the photograph, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. "I wasn't the best, but I learned fast. If you didn't learn, you didn't last." Russell's voice was rough when he finally spoke. "How old were you?" Liam's eyes met his. 6. A muscle in Russell's jaw twitched. 6. That wasn't training. That was indoctrination. Liam must have noticed the shift in his expression, because he continued, voice quieter now. "We had drills before dawn, tactical training, live weapons by the time we were 8. I saw kids my age break ribs, break fingers, break their minds." He exhaled. "And then I saw them get left behind." Russell exhaled through his nose, hands clenching into fists. He couldn't imagine it, didn't want to. But Liam wasn't finished. "I never wanted to be there," he said. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. But I knew that one day they'd make me, and if I didn't—" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I'd be the one on the ground." Russell forced himself to ask, "Did you—" Liam shook his head before the question even finished. "Number never. It's just practice. The other boy too." His voice was steady. "I did what I had to. I trained. I obeyed. But I never crossed that line." For the first time since the conversation started, Russell let out a slow breath. Liam continued. "The day before my first real assignment, I ran." Russell's gaze sharpened. Liam tilted his head slightly, as if replaying the memory in his mind. "I knew they'd come after me. I knew what they did to deserters. I didn't care." He exhaled, rubbing his hands over his knees. "I didn't want to be their weapon." Russell's chest felt tight. Liam looked down. "I crawled under the perimeter fence at night, cut my hands open on the wire, ran until I collapsed, kept running when I woke up. I stole food, slept in train stations. I was supposed to disappear." He glanced at the photograph, his lips pressing into a thin line. "I guess I didn't run far enough." Silence. Russell didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to process any of this. Liam wasn't just some kid who had fallen through the cracks. He had been shaped into something else, something that should have made him dangerous, something that should have turned him into a ghost. But instead, he was here. Sitting in Russell's kitchen, folding laundry, waiting in the rain with an umbrella, cooking soup. He was just a kid. And for the first time, Russell saw him exactly for what he was. Not a soldier, not a ghost, not a threat. Just a boy who never got to be one. Liam's shoulders squared slightly. His expression gave away nothing, but his hands were clenched into small, white-knuckled fists. Russell exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. He should have been angry, should have been more careful, more distant. But instead, he found himself saying, "You're staying." Liam blinked. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Russell leaned back against the counter, his arms crossing. His voice was calmer now. "You're not running again. I don't care who's looking for you. They're not getting you back." Liam swallowed. For the first time, his composure cracked. It was slight, barely noticeable, a flicker of something in his eyes, a tiny, barely there hitch in his breath. But Russell saw it, and somehow, that was enough. Russell didn't sleep that night. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the glass windows of his bedroom. The weight of Liam's story pressed down on him, refusing to let go. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photograph. The way Liam had stood, not stiff, not afraid, but trained. The way he had spoken, not like a victim, but like someone who had already accepted the worst. And yet, he was still just a kid. Russell ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. He needed to do something. By dawn, he had made up his mind. The moment the clock hit 7, Russell picked up his phone. He didn't hesitate before dialing. The line rang once before a gruff voice answered. "Whitmore." Russell leaned back in his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I need a full background check." A pause, then, "On who?" Russell hesitated, then said, "An orphanage." That got Benjamin's attention. Benjamin Clark had been Russell's private investigator for years. A former detective, sharp, relentless, good at making things disappear when needed. "You're not usually in the business of orphanages," Benjamin said dryly. Russell wasn't in the mood for humor. "It's not what it seems. I need everything. Who funds it? Who runs it? What's happening behind closed doors? No stone unturned." There was a beat of silence. Then, "All right, give me a name." Russell gave it to him. "Give me 2 days," Benjamin said, his voice shifting to something more serious. "If there's something there, I'll find it." Russell nodded. "Make sure no one knows you're looking." Another pause. "You in trouble?" Russell's gaze flickered toward the closed guest room door. His jaw tightened. "No," he said. "Not me." The lawyer's office was quiet, the kind of high-rise firm that dealt in cold facts and airtight paperwork. Russell sat across from Daniel Carter, a man who had been handling his legal affairs for nearly a decade. The lawyer pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, scanning the document in front of him. "You're serious about this?" Daniel finally asked. Russell exhaled sharply. "Would I be here if I wasn't?" Daniel smirked. "Fair enough." He leaned back. "Permanent guardianship. That's a big step." Russell's jaw tightened. "I know." Daniel glanced over the paperwork. "He has no legal records. None that are real." Daniel frowned, but didn't ask further. "It'll take time. There'll be background checks, social workers." "I don't care how long it takes," Russell interrupted. His voice was steady. "I want it done." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." Russell exhaled. This was happening. He wasn't just protecting Liam from whoever might be looking for him. He was making sure no one had the right to take him away. Russell hadn't intended for Liam to overhear. He had been in his office, speaking to child services over the phone, going through the legal process when he heard it. A quiet intake of breath. He turned. Liam stood in the doorway, eyes wide, frozen in place. Russell sighed, running a hand through his hair. "How long have you been standing there?" Liam didn't answer. His gaze flicked toward the papers on the desk, then back to Russell. "You're—" He hesitated, his voice almost uncertain. "You're keeping me." Russell didn't flinch. That was the plan. Liam stared at him, his hands clenching at his sides. "Why?" Russell let out a breath. "Because I can." It wasn't the answer Liam had been expecting. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. He seemed lost, like the idea of someone choosing to keep him was something he couldn't quite process. Russell leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Unless you want me to take it all back?" Liam shook his head. "Fast, too fast." Russell smirked. "Didn't think so." Liam stood there for a moment longer. Then, without another word, he turned and left. Russell exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Maybe this was the right decision. Maybe it was the biggest mistake of his life. Either way, there was no turning back now. A quiet promise. Later that night, Russell walked into his office, expecting to find it exactly as he left it. But something was different. A small piece of paper sat neatly on his desk. Russell frowned, reaching for it. The handwriting was small, a little uneven. "Thank you." Russell stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he placed it in the top drawer of his desk. He didn't need thanks, but somehow, that note meant more than any contract ever could. Russell had been expecting something, not peace, not safety. When you disrupt something powerful, it never disappears. It just moves. Benjamin's report had confirmed the worst. The orphanage was a front, but by the time the authorities raided it, the training facility was gone. Empty halls, abandoned dormitories, every trace of its purpose was erased. They had known. Someone had tipped them off, and that meant someone was watching. Russell had barely set foot in his office when he noticed it. A plain envelope. No sender, no markings, just like the last one. His stomach tightened as he reached for it, peeling it open. Inside, there was another photograph. Russell stilled. It wasn't Liam this time. It was him. Him and Liam. Taken from afar, through a window. The angle was too high for a pedestrian. Whoever took it had planned it, waited for the right moment. A cold chill ran through him. They weren't just watching Liam, they were watching both of them. Russell clenched his jaw, his grip tightening around the photo until the edges crumpled. This wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Benjamin answered on the first ring. "Tell me you found something," Russell growled. There was a pause. Then Benjamin let out a sigh. Not enough. The place was scrubbed clean. Whoever ran it had resources. Russell slammed the photo onto his desk. They know where we are. A pause. What? Russell exhaled through his nose, forcing his voice to stay calm. They sent another photo. Of me, of Liam, taken from a distance. Benjamin swore under his breath. They're testing you. Russell clenched his jaw. Then let's make sure they know I don't play games. I'll escalate this with Linda, Benjamin said. We'll see if we can track any remaining connections to the orphanage. But Russell, what? If they've gone this far, they aren't going to stop. Russell knew that. He had known it the moment he took Liam in, but knowing it didn't make it easier. He hung up. Russell barely noticed Liam at first. The boy stood in the hallway just outside the door, his arms folded tightly around himself. His gaze flicked to the crumpled photograph on the desk. They found us, Liam murmured. Russell's pulse ticked. Doesn't matter. Liam's expression was unreadable. Then, quietly, but firmly, I have to leave. Russell's entire body went rigid. No. They won't stop, Liam said, voice calm despite the storm behind his eyes. I know how they work. They'll go after what's in their way. And that's you. Russell's teeth clenched. I'm not abandoning you. Liam's jaw tightened. I'm trying to keep you safe. Russell scoffed, shaking his head. I don't need a kid to protect me. Liam's fists clenched at his sides. That's not what I mean. The words hung in the air, charged, filled with something raw and uncertain. Russell took a slow breath. Then tell me what you do mean. Liam hesitated, his shoulders drawn tight. He looked away, then back again, as if struggling to find the words. Finally, his voice cracked just slightly. I don't want to leave. Russell stilled. Liam swallowed hard, his fingers gripping the hem of his hoodie. I just don't want you to get hurt. The confession settled between them, like something fragile, something unspoken until now. And suddenly, Russell saw it. The way Liam had been waiting for this, for someone to tell him that leaving wasn't the only way to protect the people he cared about. Russell exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. Then, before he could think too much about it, he stepped forward, and for the first time, he pulled Liam into a hug. Liam tensed, completely still, like he didn't know what to do with the feeling of being held. Then, slowly, hesitantly, Liam's fingers curled into the fabric of Russell's shirt. Russell didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because Liam was staying, and no one was taking him away. Russell had always known that power didn't just vanish. It retreated, regrouped, and returned stronger. The organization hadn't disappeared. It had moved. And the second photograph, that was proof. They weren't just watching Liam. They were watching him, too. The knowledge settled deep in his chest, cold and unshakable. He had invited this danger the moment he took Liam in. But he wasn't backing down now. His phone buzzed against the desk. Russell grabbed it without hesitation. We found something, Benjamin said. His voice was quiet, but there was an urgency beneath it. Russell straightened in his chair. Tell me. Gregory Vance. Russell's fingers tightened around the phone. He recognized the name. A former military officer turned mercenary, ruthless, calculated, a ghost in the system. One of the men responsible for turning children into soldiers. Where is he? Russell asked, his voice deadly calm. Benjamin exhaled. Running an operation, smuggling kids. Tonight. Russell's stomach turned, but his voice remained steady. Location. Benjamin hesitated. You don't have to be there. Russell's grip on the phone tightened. Send me the damn location. A beat. Then, check your phone. Russell ended the call and looked at the address. His decision had already been made. This ends tonight. The industrial port was a graveyard of rusted metal and abandoned warehouses. It should have been empty, but it wasn't. Russell sat in the surveillance van, Benjamin beside him, eyes locked on the monitors. Children, huddled together, some silent, some crying. Cargo waiting to be moved. Russell's fists clenched. "I count at least 15 armed men," one of the agents muttered. Benjamin nodded. "We go in silent, no mistakes." Russell's jaw was tight, no mistakes. But then he felt it, a presence beside him. He turned. Liam. Russell had told him to stay back, but of course the kid hadn't listened. Liam's gaze was fixed on the screen, his hands curled into fists. Not in fear, in recognition. He knew these people. Russell exhaled. "Stay behind me." Liam didn't argue. It was time. The signal was given. Silently, the team moved in. Shadows against metal, boots barely making a sound against the damp concrete. Russell followed, his heartbeat steady, calculated. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew how to handle men like Vance. Inside, chaos erupted. Gunfire, yelled orders, footsteps pounding as men tried to escape. Russell kept his eyes on one target, Gregory Vance. And Vance saw him too. The man smirked, stepping back into the shadows. Running. Russell didn't hesitate. He followed. Liam had stayed hidden like Russell told him. But then he saw them. Familiar faces. Ghosts of a past he had tried to outrun. One of the older boys, a trainer, a soldier in the making, like Liam had once been. The boy's eyes locked onto him. "You," he muttered. Liam didn't move, didn't flinch. Not anymore. The boy smirked. "Didn't think you'd make it this far." Liam exhaled slowly. "Neither did I." A pause. Then, "You were one of the best. And now, look at you." Liam's fists clenched. Then, a voice. "He's not alone." The boy stilled. Russell stepped beside Liam, his presence solid, unshakable. Liam didn't look at him, but he felt it. The weight of protection. For the first time, he wasn't standing alone. And for the first time, he didn't have to run. Russell found him in the back of the warehouse. Vance had a gun, a last desperate attempt to control the situation, but Russell had already called the shots. The agents closed in. Vance had nowhere left to run. Russell stepped forward, standing over him as he was restrained. Vance smirked. "You have no idea what you've stepped into, Whitmore." Russell's expression was unreadable. Then he leaned in, voice low, steady. "You're done." Vance's smirk faded. And just like that, it was over. The raid was over. The children were safe. The men were in custody. The warehouse, silent. Russell stood beside Liam, watching as the last of the children were led into safety. Liam let out a slow breath. "It's over." Russell glanced down. Not yet. But it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, Liam was finally free. The court documents arrived on a quiet afternoon. Russell sat at his desk, staring at the thick packet of legal paperwork spread in front of him. His name was printed in bold official letters, and beneath it, Liam Whitmore. The adoption was final. No more legal battles, no more paperwork, no more questions about whether Liam belonged with him or not, because now he did. Russell exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't expected this to feel so permanent, so real. He had fought hostile takeovers, negotiated billion-dollar deals, built an empire from the ground up. But nothing had ever felt as significant as this. The boy was his, and no one could take him away. It started with the small things. Russell wasn't the kind of man who adjusted easily to change. But Liam had seamlessly woven himself into his life, into his routines, without Russell even realizing it. Mornings weren't silent anymore. Russell would walk into the kitchen to find Liam trying, and often failing, to make breakfast. Burnt toast, scrambled eggs that were more shell than egg, a kitchen counter covered in flour from an attempt at pancakes. "You planning to burn the house down?" Russell muttered one morning, eyeing the disaster in front of him. Liam, unfazed, flipped a barely cooked pancake onto a plate. I'm learning. Russell sighed, rolling up his sleeves. Move. You're going to give me food poisoning. Liam smirked, but he stepped aside, watching carefully as Russell took over the stove. That became their routine. Cooking together. Small moments of quiet understanding. Then came the schoolwork. At first, Russell wasn't sure if Liam would even agree to it. The boy had never had a real education, not in the way most kids did. But one evening, Russell walked into the library and found Liam hunched over a textbook, a deep frown on his face. Russell leaned against the doorway. Problem? Liam sighed, tapping his pencil against the desk. Math is stupid. Russell smirked. No argument there. Liam glanced at him, surprised. Then, slowly, he grinned. And that's how Russell found himself spending nights tutoring an ex-child soldier on fractions and algebra. Small things, little moments. But they added up. The first time Liam played in the snow, Russell almost didn't recognize him. The winter storm had rolled in overnight, blanketing the estate in thick, untouched white. Russell was pouring himself coffee when he looked out the window and saw Liam standing in the snow, arms outstretched, grinning like an idiot. Russell blinked. The kid was laughing. It wasn't like Liam never smiled, but it was always small, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to. This question mark. This was different. Russell stepped outside, the cold biting against his skin. What the hell are you doing? Liam turned, still grinning. I've never seen snow before. Russell paused. He hadn't thought about that. Liam was born into a world where survival came first. There was no time for playing in the snow, for throwing himself into a pile of it just because he could. Russell exhaled, shaking his head. You're going to catch pneumonia. Liam smirked. Then I'll die happy. Russell groaned. Get inside. Liam, of course, didn't listen. Instead, he hurled a snowball at Russell's face. It hit square on his shoulder. Russell froze. Then slowly, he turned. Liam realized his mistake a second too late. Shit! Russell launched a snowball straight at his chest. Liam yelped, staggering back, then immediately retaliated. And just like that, a full-blown snowball fight erupted in the middle of the driveway. Russell had no idea how long they were out there. All he knew was that Liam was laughing. And for the first time, he looked like a normal kid. The organization wasn't gone. Not entirely. They had taken a hit, lost their leaders. But Russell knew how people like them operated. They would rebuild, regroup, come back stronger, and he wasn't going to wait for that to happen. Russell sat in his office late one night, flipping through files Benjamin had sent over. Names, connections, people still involved in the underground network. Liam walked in, stopping at the sight of the documents. They're still out there, Liam murmured. Russell glanced up. Yeah. Liam hesitated. Then, what are we going to do? Russell exhaled, setting the file down. He studied the boy in front of him. Liam was different now, not just surviving, living, growing. But the scars were still there. The past hadn't disappeared. Russell leaned back in his chair. We fight, Liam blinked. We? Russell smirked. You think I'm going to let you run off and do it alone? Liam huffed, shaking his head. But there was something lighter in his expression, something like relief. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. Late that night, Liam knocked on Russell's door. Russell frowned. What? Liam hesitated, shifting awkwardly. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, good night. Russell stilled. It was such a simple thing. But for Liam, it wasn't. The kid had spent years sleeping with one eye open, never saying good night, never expecting a morning. Russell nodded, his voice softer than usual. Yeah. Good night, kid. Liam nodded, turning to leave. But just before he stepped out, he paused. Thanks. Russell watched as Liam disappeared down the hall. And for the first time since this all began, Russell knew they weren't running anymore. they were home. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. And if you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends on WhatsApp. And now, share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values yet entertaining. See you there.